Esteemed members of the Inquisition, distinguished representatives of the Astra Militarum, and honored governors of our Imperium's domains, today we gather in council to address a threat of unparalleled ferocity that stalks the void between stars, the Tyranid menace. The Xenomagi have long studied the Tyranids. Since their first expansion and contact in the Tyrannic Wars, we have sought means to beat them. Our galaxy stands on the brink, not from within, but from an external horror that seeks to consume the life it encounters. As it is aptly named, the Great Devourer is unlike any foe our Imperium has faced. Its countless swarms have already darkened the skies of numerous worlds, leaving behind barren husks. Now more than ever, it is imperative that we remain vigilant and prepared to recognize the precursors of their approach. The Tyranids are cunning predators, and their invasions begin long before the first clawed footfall touches a planet's surface. The signs are subtle yet unmistakable for those who know what to look for. Anomalous psychic disturbances, a chilling silence in the void where once there was the vibrant chatter of the warp. These are but the first whispers of their coming. Our purpose today is not to instill fear, but to arm ourselves with knowledge. Recognizing these signs means preparing our defenses, rallying our forces, and calling upon the Astra Militarum's might and our citizens' faith. Each world saved from the Tyranid horror is one less meal to this tyrant of hunger. Let the Emperor's will strengthen our resolve, so please sit and listen closely. The insidious first stage of a Tyranid invasion, discovery. Picture the galaxy not as a fixed map with clearly defined borders, but as a dark ocean teeming with unseen predators. The vast hive fleets prowl, driven by a singular, all-consuming hunger. Yet, they are not mindless beasts engaging in random acts of destruction. There is a chilling calculation beneath their movements, a form of hunting where the first strike is not the clash of claw and fang, but the silent sowing of seeds of corruption. The Tyranid search for prey worlds is a long process. Psychic tendrils from the hive mind stretch across the warp, seeking echoes of concentrated biomass, planets teeming with life. Astropathic cries of distress, panicked reports of strange Xenos sightings, or the sudden silence of an isolated outpost act as lures, drawing the swarm ever closer. Stray bioships, flung far ahead of the main fleet, might drift for centuries, their slumbering crews awaiting the subtle psychic signals that betray a world ripe for harvesting. Discovery, however, is only the first step. The Tyranids excel at exploiting a civilization's weaknesses to facilitate its eventual consumption. This is where the vanguard organisms, most notably the gene stealers, come into play. They possess a combination of predatory cunning and uncanny chameleon-like abilities. These infiltrators arrive by various means, lurking within seemingly harmless space hulks that drift towards a target world, hidden on rogue trader vessels, or even seeded in the forgotten holds of refugee ships fleeing an earlier Tyranid attack. Gene stealers have a dual purpose, corrupting a target world from within and gathering vital biological intelligence. Their infiltration often focuses on the dispossessed, the marginalized, those overlooked and yearning for a better life amidst the Imperium's often unforgiving order. An underhive gang, a mutant clan on the fringes of an industrial world, isolated planetary nobles eager to defy Imperial authority, all offer fertile ground for the gene stealer's psychic manipulation. A gene stealer infestation is a hidden cancer growing unchecked. The initial infection, known as the gene stealer's curse, twists the victims on a genetic level. They become fanatically devoted to their brood leader, and their offspring are hideously altered, born as human gene stealer hybrids. With each successive generation, the physical and mental corruption spreads, the psychic imprint of the brood mind taking hold, creating a hidden network ripe for exploitation. Take, for example, the case of Goza Quintus, buried in inquisitorial archives is a different truth. A gene-stealer cult had risen to dominate the Trist dynasty, poisoning the wider system with their influence by shipping and transporting goods and their genetic influence across the stars. Lest we forget, the Imperium itself can be unwittingly complicit in facilitating a gene-stealer infestation. A mining colony sent to a newly discovered world, a relief effort to a planet racked by famine. These noble acts can carry the seeds of their destruction. One contaminated colonist, one overlooked mutant among the laborers, is all it takes for the insidious process to begin. This is the true terror of the discovery phase. We face an enemy that does not simply attack our borders, but subverts them from within, often over generations. They quietly and subtly grow larger. It turns our people into weapons against us, and exploits the bureaucratic vastness of the Imperium to remain hidden until it is far too late. As the hive mind wanders towards its chosen targets, the shadows in the warp lengthen. The first whispers of doom affect the minds of psychers, and a cold certainty settles. The Tyranid fleet approaches its unsuspecting victim. This second stage of invasion marks a grim transformation. The hidden hand gives way to the inevitable descent of the ravenous swarm. If discovery was a cancerous growth, the approach is the slow fever consuming the unfortunate patient. With the target world's defenses undermined, its populace tainted by gene-stealer cults or lulled into a false sense of security by the Imperium's lumbering bureaucracy, the hive mind draws its fleets onwards. These monstrous vessels are not warships but grotesque extensions of the Tyranid swarm. Their approach is deliberately measured. The Imperium is vast, and while warp travel allows for seemingly impossible jumps across light years, pinpointing a single planet within a star system demands a slower, more methodical hunt. Tyranid fleets rarely charge in a single relentless spearhead, but often sprawl in a tendril-like formation as they close in on their prey. This segmented approach allows for greater scouting potential. Outlying asteroids are stripped of resources, feral orcs on backwater moons are eradicated, and all genetic data is fed back into the intellect of the hive mind for further refinement of their invasion plan and creation of new creatures. The shadow in the warp grows more oppressive, a nauseating blanket smothering targeted star systems. Astropathic channels, the lifeblood of communication, are severed one by one. Navigators guiding vessels through the Empyrean report harrowing disturbances. Grotesque visions of fleshy maws, impossible insectoid shapes flickering within the once familiar currents. Those with weaker minds may succumb entirely to madness, their vessels lost and their crews consumed by the terrors of the warp. The Imperium, for all of its power, was blinded and deafened by its monstrous foe, and it could lose entire systems without a single call for help. Navigators who said that the warp's rolling tempest calms. The colors they see bleed away to a still blackness. Navigation is almost impossible, leaving or entering a system smothered by the shadow of the hive mind. They say when the Tyranids turn their attention towards a planet, there is a presence in the warp, an ancient immense pressure that can sense those who touch it too closely to madness. As this presence approaches its target system, gene-stealer cults will begin to enact more aggressive sabotage campaigns. Visions will permeate those who may be gifted psychically, madness ensuing, visions of a god. Some even see visions of the Emperor. The Imperium's network of sentinel stations, outposts, and void watchers was designed with the crude weaponry of orcs or the insidious fleets of chaos in mind. Yet the bioships of the Tyranid swarm are silent to conventional sensors. Lacking plasma drives or void shield generators, they offer no familiar signals for distant augurs to dissect and identify. Theirs is an organic stealth, masked by the psychic shroud they cast, blurring the lines between nightmares and reality. If anything, the silence they manifest over real space is the only real indicator that they are there. Imagine the plight of distant border worlds. Reports of civil unrest on a compliant planet begin to trickle in, but these disturbances are chalked up to local malcontents or even undercurrents of chaos and corruption. Astropathic cries for aid are met with garbled messages, lost in a sea of psychic static. Patrol ships sent to investigate disappear in the void. Their absence is blamed on warp disturbances. There is a growing sense of unease, a feeling that something monstrous lurks on the edge of perception, yet no enemy can be identified. By the time the first Tyranid bioships pierce the edge of the star system, their payloads of mycetic spores and vanguard organisms disgorged towards the poisoned heart of the world within, it is often far, far too late. Their tactics are not bound by tradition, cumbersome supply chains, or the factionalism the Imperium knows so well. Their decentralized yet eerily coordinated forces make it almost impossible for them to anticipate or reliably counter until they choose to reveal themselves. We're facing an opponent who rewrites the rulebook even as the battle rages. This, my friends, is the horror we face. It is a race against an enemy we cannot fully see, a relentless biological tide that uses the Imperium's vastness and the warp's psychic miasma as a shield. Our greatest bastions may be breached from within before a single cannon is fired in their defense. But despair is a weapon wielded by our foes. Let us instead transform this grim knowledge into our own shield. The seemingly insignificant rebellions, the isolated distress calls, the flickering nightmares of our astropaths lie the first signs of the approaching storm. We must redouble our efforts, enhance augur arrays, invest in psychotraining specialized in the nauseating resonance of the hive mind, and demand greater integration between the far-flung arms of the Imperium. The battlefields upon which this advance is fought are not only in the void between stars, but in the corners of neglected planets and within the bureaucracy of the Imperium itself. Then comes the attack. The sky itself becomes the first battlefield. Tyranid bioships, their distended forms now revealed in full, pierce the atmosphere. Their primary goal is not the immediate destruction of orbital defenses, though that is a necessary objective, but the corrupting of the air the defenders breathe. Mycetic spores, horrific seed pods teeming with Tyranid shock troops, descend in suffocating blizzards. They choke cities, clog manufactorum ventilation, and transform even the most fortified bunkers into claustrophobic death traps. Imagine terrified guardsmen in an embattled world. The first gas masks and hazmat suits prove useless, the air mutating your lungs, your skin bursting with monstrous growths from within. Raveners, slashing monstrosities honed for close-quarters butchery, erupt from the choking clouds. Hormagaunts, a chittering tide of claws and fangs, swarm from the spore-infested wilderness, their sheer numbers overwhelming even the most hardened trench lines. The sky itself, once the domain of aircraft and soaring defense, is rendered a death sentence. Yet, the horror extends even deeper. Spore mines descend amidst this carnage, monstrous organic blisters that rupture on impact. These are not conventional explosives, but biological bombs. Corrosive acids capable of melting ceramite armor, choking neurotoxins that bypass filters, ravenous insects that burrow into flesh seeking purchase within their victims. All this and more pours forth. The battlefield itself transforms into a seething mass of predatory flora and fauna, the very ground beneath the defenders' feet, turning against them. The Imperium is built on order, the grinding of manufactorums, the discipline of massed armies, the inviolable chain of command that turns billions of lives into a shield. The Tyranids shatter this paradigm with speed. Every Vox channel crackles with confusion and terror, reports of ambushes within supposed safe zones, distress calls intermixed with the skittering clicks and shrieks of Tyranid biolanguages. Artillery batteries turn their guns on their own regiments, the gunners' minds consumed by the insidious spores. Even the mightiest of the Imperium's warriors, the Astartes, find their carefully honed tactics tested beyond limit. A battle line designed to hold against hordes of orcs crumbles when the Tyranid threat comes not just from without, but from within. The world of Vand, renowned for its impregnable fortresses and formidable armaments, was prepared for any conventional invasion. Its rulers had fortified the planet against the constant threat of orc incursions from the Octarian war zone, amassing an arsenal and a well-trained army that stood as a bulwark against the tide of barbarism. Enormous shield generators rendered the planet immune to spore mine bombardments, while dense walls and deep foundations seemed to deny any foothold to the enemy. However, the Tyranids, a foe unlike any other, presented a challenge that brute strength and conventional tactics could not repel. The Tyranids do not simply assault, they adapt, and in the case of Vand, they demonstrated a terrifyingly creative approach to overcoming the planet's defenses. Choosing the inaccessible sky-pierced mountains as their beachhead, the hive mind deployed an array of psychic monstrosities: zoanthropes, neurothropes, male scepters, and other bioforms of immense psychic power. These creatures, employing their psychic might, systematically dismantled Vand's defenses from within. Void shields that had protected the planet from bombardment fizzled into nothingness, while the walls that seemed impenetrable cracked and crumbled under the assault. As if the psychic onslaught were not enough, these behemoths were shielded by waves of lesser Tyranid bioforms, which absorbed the brunt of the defenders' desperate counterattacks. Following in the wake of this psychic devastation were fresh waves of Tyranid beasts that overwhelmed whatever remained of Vand's once mighty defenses. This adaptation strategy and psychic warfare isolated Vand's largest citadels, allowing the Tyranid swarm to land almost unchallenged and consume the planet. These beings can appear to overcome any challenge set against them, adapting and overcoming. The hive mind has begun to learn. In other worlds, they have learned to consume the food of Imperial defenders, to starve them out. Others, through psychic projection or manipulation, have led entire battle companies to their death by manipulating preachers, giving them prophetic visions, only to lead all there to their ends. This, esteemed colleagues, is the goal of the attack stage. It is to shatter not just the defenses of a world, but the very will to resist. The Tyranids seek to infect their victims with the same unyielding hunger, the same single-minded predatory drive that fuels the hive fleets themselves. This tactic is born of a biological imperative, so alien, so horrifyingly pragmatic, that it defies our conventional understanding of warfare. We have been trained to see war as armies clashing, titans dueling amidst burning cities, and void battles where lances of energy decide the fate of star systems. The Tyranids reduce this concept to obscene simplicity. It is hunter versus prey, biomass to be harvested and absorbed. We hold weapons in our hands, they become the weapons, their bodies mutating into monstrous parodies of cannons, blades, and burrowing tendrils. This is not a battle for territory, nor the eradication of a specific ideology. The Tyranids do not seek to conquer, they seek to consume. The courageous stand of a single regiment, the last-ditch defiance of a hive city, the tactical brilliance of a celebrated general, all are ultimately meaningless to the hive mind. These desperate acts refine the Tyranids further, providing fresh data revealing weaknesses to exploit as they turn their unblinking gaze on their next victim. You may ask, what can I do to fight these atrocities? First and foremost, we must recognize that our war against the Tyranids is a war of attrition. These Xenos hordes seek to consume and assimilate, driven by a relentless desire to expand their biomass. Our objective is clear: to disrupt this cycle and inflict losses upon the hive that it cannot recuperate by ensuring the physical destruction of their forces so that reabsorption of their fallen is impossible. To this end, engagement in the void of space is paramount. Space combat allows us to use the mightiest weapons in our arsenal, delivering catastrophic losses to the Hive fleet. Remember, every Tyranid vessel destroyed in space is biomass denied to the enemy. Adaptability in tactics is crucial. The hive mind learns, adapts, and evolves in response to our strategies. Therefore, we must remain unpredictable, constantly varying our approaches and ensuring that no trap is sprung twice. Each battle must be a new enigma for the hive mind to solve, with the cost of each solution steeped in Tyranid blood. Ammunition is your lifeline, not precision. In the face of a Tyranid swarm, volume of fire is key. Focus your efforts on sustained barrages and relentless firepower. Avoid close-quarters combat at all costs. The Tyranids excel in such engagements, turning our fallen into fodder for their endless ranks. Creating kill zones is essential, yet expect the enemy to refrain from blundering into them. The Tyranids are cunning adversaries, capable of flanking and avoiding unfavorable confrontations. Force them into positions where our firepower can be most effective, leaving them no alternative but to face our guns head-on. On Ball, the Blood Angels used void shields to channel the Tyranids to favorable fire zones and against defensive formations. Learn from this. But remember to protect your defenses and power supplies, for the Tyranids will deploy units that can bury deep. Lastly, Scorched Earth is not just a strategy, but a necessity. Anything left behind is potential biomass for the Hive fleet. If it cannot be defended, it must be destroyed. This is not merely a battle for territory, it is a battle for the very life of our worlds. If you must give up a world in your sector, it can be remade, but against the Tyranids, we must lose battles and wars to win survival for our species. Upon the fourth stage of an invasion, the culmination of a waiting horror known simply as the submission. If the prior stages were poison coursing through a world's veins, this is the fatal climax. If you are alive at this stage, enable your virus bombs and take the Tyranids out with you. The chittering hordes and monstrosities that initially swarmed the planet are now guided with a chilling focus. The hive mind, its connection to the invasion force strengthened, begins to impose its will with ever-increasing efficiency. Information floods back. Terrain analysis, data on resistance clusters, strengths and weaknesses of the defenders gleaned not from meticulous study, but from the raw genetic code of the fallen themselves. Gene stealers, their role as infiltrators complete, rejoin the greater swarm. Pure strain gene stealers become vital frontline commanders, while the psychic thralls they've herded from the corrupted populace are driven forward as cannon fodder, their fear and confusion serving as distractions for the bio-horrors that follow in their wake. Tyranid forces begin to encircle population centers with brutal efficiency. Cities, manufactorums and fortresses, once bastions of human defiance, are transformed into feeding pens. The objective for the hive mind is to isolate prey, rendering manageable chunks to be devoured at leisure. The Tyranids will readily sacrifice thousands of their lesser organisms to achieve this end. Hormagaunts form writhing walls of flesh, forcing defenders back into fortified zones. Trigons erupt from strategically targeted tunnels, cutting off escape routes. The very ground itself becomes a shifting, treacherous hunting ground. As these monstrous sieges begin, a grotesque transformation occurs. Hive fleet bioships, their initial payloads of troops disgorged, descend deeper into the atmosphere. Vast capillary towers sprout like grotesque fungal blooms, plunging deep into the planet's crust. These biostructures begin to pump a slurry of semi-digested biomass back upwards to the waiting hive fleet, furthering its evolution and allowing for the constant creation of new reinforcements. The attack stage was about breaking the will of the invaded world. Now we witness the systematic dismantling of its infrastructure. Fortified cities designed to hold out for months are cracked open by carnifexes, their living battering rams demolishing centuries-old bastions with contemptuous ease. Vast swarms of gargoyles blot out the sun, their bioacid projectiles melting tank armor and sending defenders fleeing back into the waiting claws of the swarm. Resource outposts are pinpointed, not to be captured and exploited, but viciously exterminated, denying the defenders any chance of regrouping, any chance of outlasting their monstrous foes. The Imperium prides itself on its ability to wage wars of attrition. We understand that on many a battlefield, victory is bought not through tactical brilliance alone, but through the crushing weight of supplies and reinforcements. For every guardsman that falls, another can be conscripted and shipped to the front lines. The Tyranids render this principle horrifyingly moot. Their reinforcements are not built in distant manufactorums. They are bred in the fetid pools beneath the feet of the defenders. Each battle, each clash, each desperate, courageous last stand merely provides the hive with further genetic material to shape the next generation of attackers. It becomes a feedback loop of extermination and consumption. The most insidious aspect of the feeding, dear colleagues, lies not in the monstrous claws tearing down our walls, nor the toxins burning through our trenches. It is the despair that seeps into even the most courageous hearts. For what value does heroic sacrifice have when it merely fuels the enemy? What use is a tactical withdrawal when the planet itself has become a monstrous digestive system? We cannot allow ourselves the luxury of despair. We must cling to hope, not as a naive belief, but as an act of defiance. We must dissect their tactics, reverse engineer their evolution, find the cracks in their biological efficiency, and forge a weapon not of steel and bolters, but of the human spirit that has seen the Imperium through its darkest hours. Let the Tyranids feast upon their victories, knowing that even as they consume worlds, they will never conquer the spark that makes humanity worth fighting for. The Tyranid invasion does not culminate in the ruins of conquered cities or the silent battlefields filled with corpses. These are merely grim milestones on the path to a far more grotesque fate. I speak of the fifth stage, that of consumption. Imagine this. The final battle smoke has barely cleared when this hunger twists what we recognize as a conquered world. Mycetic spores descend from the bloated hive ships, not in thousands, but in untold millions. They blot out the sun, casting the planet into a twilight where even shadows are devoured. The landscape shudders and cracks, the ground itself ripped open as the great capillary vessels of the hive fleets plunge deep, siphoning the dying world's lifeblood. The scuttling swarms are no longer a tide, a plague. They leave not corpses but dust, not fertile soil, but the sterilized remains of what once was. Every fallen warrior, every defiant citizen, every monstrous gene stealer, all are drawn back into the swarm, not for victory's sake, but for scrutiny. Their genetic makeup is catalogued and assimilated into the vast consciousness of the hive mind with chilling efficiency. This is where the very idea of warfare breaks down, scholars. This is not the occupation of a defeated foe, but a metamorphosis. From the ravaged soil, monstrous bioconstructs heave themselves forth, pulsating behemoths more akin to organs than living creatures. Think not of siege engines or armored fortresses, but vast, cancerous growths that exist only to accelerate the process. These biofactories serve as gruesome wombs, their bloated forms teeming with newly birthed Tyranid monstrosities. The common creatures, the hormagaunts and termagants, are but the first stages in this accelerated evolution. Every ounce of organic matter plundered from the world fuels a more disturbing transformation, birthing horrors tailored specifically to counter any final vestiges of resistance. For this, brothers and sisters, is the truly monstrous genius of the Tyranid. They don't just conquer, they adapt at a terrifying pace. Once the beating heart of a world's ecosystem, the oceans now flow thick with digestive enzymes. The wind itself becomes a weapon, no longer a gentle breeze, but a choking gale carrying choking clouds of spores. These are the tools of planetary butchery, designed not to claim the world, but to break it down into a form more easily consumed. Scholars of yore have witnessed the aftermath of such consumption. Barren orbs hang in the void, devoid not only of life, but any trace of what once existed. The very air is a poisonous soup, the final lingering breath of a murdered world. This is the Tyranid's grim goal, the Great Devourer's horrifying purpose. It leaves behind no empire, no trophies of conquest, but the desolate shell of a consumed meal, a reminder that every world in its path is a feast waiting to be devoured. We must internalize these insights and prepare ourselves for the battles ahead. The Tyranid threat seeks not just to conquer, but to consume and utterly obliterate all in its path, leaving naught but lifeless husks in its wake. More significant incursions by the Tyranid swarm, for example, both Baal and Macraga, were won through sheer luck and bravery. We have observed and catalogued their methods, from the initial shadow in the warp to the voracious swarms that descend upon the land, air and sea. Their adaptability, relentless nature, and insidious capability to learn from and evolve through our resistance present a challenge unlike any other. Yet in our arsenal, we possess the keys to their undoing: knowledge, adaptability, and spirit. We must fight in space, leveraging our superior firepower. We must be unpredictable, ensuring our tactics are as varied as the stars. We must prioritize our targets, focusing on the most significant threats first, and above all, we must deny them the biomass they so desperately crave. As we conclude, let us carry forward the lessons learned with a clear directive: be vigilant, be prepared, and never yield. The Imperium has faced countless threats in its long history, yet it endures, as will we. We will see the end of this menace through unity, strength, and faith in the Emperor. For the Emperor and the survival of humanity, we stand ready.